Awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you're all here. I know everyone has to get into the room, but welcome, everyone. I know this is actually a super awesome way to spend a Friday. Isn't that right? This is Laura Catena, everyone, in the house. Here she is. So for those of you, I'm so glad you're joining. If you're joining and you're willing to turn on your camera, we really do want this to be a discussion. We're really excited to have you guys, be here and be a part of this with us. Amanda's here, yay!
I know, I just saw Amanda's photo, that's great.
Yay, that's so wonderful. Anyway, so
welcome
everyone.
Oh, I thought she was wearing a mask, but no, it's the light on her face.
Are you in your car, Amanda?
I'm getting in the car. I'm getting ready to leave work. But I'm so excited for you. Good to see you. See you both.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining.
There's Barkley.
Awesome.
Hi, Lola.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Feel free, everyone. Say hello.
Oh my God, there's Toshio. Wait, my sake hero, my mom's friend.
That is so wonderful.
Wait, look, Toshio. Wait, I think I have a picture of her. Toshio met my mom like a million years ago. Like this, my mom might have looked like this when you first met her.
Oh, yeah.
That's about like 30 years ago, guys.
Mm.
Yeah. What vineyard is she standing in?
She is here. She is in a vineyard that none of the wines we're drinking today, but we call it Domingo Vineyard. It's named after my grandfather. We only make Chardonnay and Cabernet from that vineyard.
Okay, wonderful. I love pictures. So yeah, everyone is obviously here and you realize that we have Laura with us. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my very, very great honor to have this incredible woman and winemaker here with us today. A few interesting thoughts as we go through this tasting, because we have 5 beautiful wines to taste. I know a lot of you may only have 3, which is totally wonderful. But as we go through this, we're gonna have a discussion. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And in fact, I was just informed that Laura has a rule that she doesn't move on to the next wine until there are at least 2 questions. So for the moment, as we go through the kind of first part, if you throw those questions in the chat, I'll moderate those and get them over to her to answer as part of the conversation. But we'll definitely save some time at the end so that we can have an open discussion. You guys can ask her questions directly, obviously, and ask about the wines and all of that wonderful stuff. So as we so why don't we go ahead and we are started, and that's the good news. So welcome, hello, Laura, how are you?
I'm very well. This is a great way to spend the Friday evening.
It is. And tell everyone where you are at the moment.
So I'm actually in San Francisco, but hopefully going soon to Mendoza. But yes, I've been what they call quarantining here because it's where my children go to school. My husband lives, yeah, I've been in Argentina through video, like many of you have lived half your lives in another place through video. That I'm in the same situation.
Yes,
I feel like I'm in the vineyards, because you can talk to people everywhere and see things everywhere, and we've gotten so used to it. But I am in San Francisco.
And you usually, because normally in the non-COVID times, you're traveling back and forth quite a bit, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. So the last time I was there was February. Then it was basically closed. You couldn't even enter. And now they've opened again. And so I'm planning to go probably in the next month.
Okay.
We are in the middle of harvest. So I actually will manage to not miss a harvest, which is kind of amazing.
That is. When are you going to start harvesting at this moment? Because I guess we're getting pretty close now.
Yeah, so usually, the end of January, you start harvesting the warmer regions. That will be the equivalent to August in Northern Hemisphere. So maybe, some white varieties in the really warm regions, lower altitudes. And then we go usually till March, April. And there's a few, like we do make some sweet wines that we'll later. But most of the harvest happens around mid-March to end of March.
Mid-March to end of March. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's really exciting that you won't miss a vineyard or
Yeah.
a harvest. That's
Yeah, yeah.
So, Sasha,
yes,
Tom and I are up in San Francisco area also.
wonderful.
Oh, hello from neighbors.
I know we just had a few people jump on. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming all the way from San Francisco to our Zoom. I think we probably have some people from outside of California, maybe. I'm not sure, but that might also be a possibility. I think I know some people from New Jersey are here, if I remember.
Yay.
So I think we were going to start off. So the order that we're tasting the wines in today, we are starting off with our the Catena Alta Chardonnay. So the 2018 is what all of you will have at the moment. South Carolina, that's right. Lael's in South Carolina. That's fantastic.
Yay.
Oh, and Amanda was asking how the vintage is looking, this vintage.
So this vintage is looking good. We had a mini frost, but not really bad. We haven't had significant hail. Because of that mini frost, the yields are not high, but they're not low. So it's actually looking very good. You know, I think the main issue, which is obviously was the same issue in California, is it just takes longer to harvest when you have to have COVID precautions.
Yes.
So the timing of everything is very difficult because you need to harvest at the right time, but then you need to keep people safe. So, but at least we already did it once because we were caught in the middle of harvest with COVID. So
That's right.
Yeah, so it's a second time around. I mean, I think, you know, in a way, California and the Northern Hemisphere will have only had to do one harvest. Hopefully, you know, it will be a little safer by July, August, and September when you do the harvest here.
Yes. I think that I know that we were talking to a winemaker. I mean, it's been the same for everyone, and it's been hard to find help, I think, too. The difficulty in actually finding people who are able to work the harvest and keeping the safe conditions.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, we had an amazing thing happen, which is that we were doing this new school with a program with the local schools, with the local high schools, because like all the kids wanted to be policemen and policewomen. And
really?
that's like a very worthy profession, but we were like, why not some of you guys come work in viticulture? Like you will actually make more money, you know, in
Really?
working in a winery. Yeah, it's just that the police jobs seem very secure, you know, especially, you know, I don't know, it just seems like a job that you will retain. Like there's a little less opportunity in Argentina than you have here in the US, where you can do all kinds of different things. Although I think police people do quite well in the US as well, and probably much better than Argentina. Anyhow, the point being is that we had this program with the high school kids, and they were amazing. And then all of a sudden COVID happens and they became our essential workers. And actually they helped us get the harvest done in many places because we couldn't have people from outside, from other provinces or even from other countries. Like we have a lot of people from Bolivia who are, you know, highly trained harvesting people that are just like the best of the best because they're so good. They're just, you know, they basically move from one harvest to the next in all of South America, and they couldn't enter Argentina. So actually we had like our interns save us. And it was pretty amazing. And actually out of 3, one of them has stayed working with us.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah.
And they're still there now, obviously.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Amanda wants to make sure that you tell the story of wine helping more people than being a doctor.
Oh, okay.
But
well,
first, before we do that, I think we should. Yes, let's go ahead and start with the first wine, which is the beautiful Catena Alta Chardonnay. So a little bit about this wine. I think you were gonna, first of all, bring us to obviously Argentina, where we have a very, very significant influence of altitude that is very, very specific to your wines. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So, so basically, you know, if you think of Argentina, it's like a triangle, right? And so if you go smack in the middle, you have the Atlantic Ocean on the east. That's where Buenos Aires, like the big city, where you have museums, and nobody should not go to Buenos Aires at some point in their life. Like it's basically just such a great place. Wait, actually, hands raised. Who's been to Buenos Aires?
Has anyone? Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a couple of you. So are you agreeing with me that it's a very exciting city?
Yes, very much.
Thank you, Janet. One thing that people have complained to me is that there's a lot of dog poop on the ground.
There is that too, yes.
And that is very, you guys, Argentinians do not pick up the dog poop, which is horrible. Like I get horrified by it, but that's just the way it is. I think it's actually improved somewhat. The last time I was in Buenos Aires, I noted that it was a little better. So maybe they want more tourists to come. I don't know, but it's a gorgeous city. And then if you go smack to the west, right before you hit the Andes Mountains, you know, on the other side, you've got Chile. Right before you hit the Andes Mountains, you've got Mendoza, which is the region where 70% of the Argentine wines are made. And it's, you know, the most traditional region. We've been making wine there since the 16th century. So for a very long time. And we did not have prohibition because, in fact, we had the opposite of prohibition, because between the 19th and the early 20th century, you know, we had 6 million Europeans, mostly Italians, come to Argentina. And there were 500,000 people in Argentina at the beginning of the 19th century. So you can imagine that, you know, the population was multiplied multiple times by all these immigrants, and they brought the traditions of wine drinking. So that actually sort of made winemaking explode, because all of these immigrants, like, think about it, Spaniards and Italians, what do they need more than anything else? Their wine, right? Because they're missing their family. And actually we had people from all over. Like there's also like a significant Russian immigration, Lebanese immigration. There's people from Wales that went to the south to Patagonia. There's Irish. There's a lot of people with Irish names. You know, so there's actually people from all over, but the majority were from Spain and Italy.
And Laura, you're Italian, right? Your heritage.
So actually Italian and Spanish. So
Spanish. Okay.
I'm about half and half. So the name Catena is Italian, and the word actually means chain in Italian.
Okay.
But anyhow, so back to the region. I just want to show you a photo. So just for you to picture, this is one of the vineyards in Mendoza. So you see the mountains with the snow and the vineyards underneath. So basically, when you're in Mendoza, you're always looking at the mountains. Like the way to know if you're going north, south, east, west is just you look, where's the mountains? And then you know where you're going. And the very cool thing is that we have vineyards between around 2,700 feet and 6,000 feet elevation. And between these two places, which are only about an hour away at driving, because, you know, you basically drive and you're going up and up and up, you know, kind of like when you're California. So when you go to Tahoe, that like you start in one place and it's pretty warm, and then, you know, you start driving up and all of a sudden it's really, really cold. The same thing happens in Mendoza. And so you have the equivalent of, you know, the Southern Rhone in France, you know, which is pretty warm. It's like very close to the Languedoc climate, or maybe the Central Valley in California. And then you go to Champagne and Burgundy, you know, which would be the cooler, or places in the US like, you know, Oregon, or even some parts of the Russian River. So that distance in France, you know, from Southern Rhone to Champagne is about a 7-hour drive. In Argentina, to go between those two climates, you know, to the pretty cold, like it's cold up there, 5,000 to 6,000 feet. And, you know, it snows many times. It's cold in the summer. There's a little breeze, although it's beautiful and sunny, but it's, you know, it's relatively cool. That's 1 hour or less. So what we have is these little microclimates, and, you know, the flavors are very different according to the temperature, but they're also different according to the soils. Because at the higher altitudes, we see bigger stones, because all these stones were formed by alluvion. So when you hear the term alluvial soil, it's usually a soil that's pretty stony, but they can also have clays and sands. But it basically, alluvial refers to the fact that it formed when glaciers melted. So think about the Andes, they form, you know, between 150 and 40 million years ago, when the two plates, you know, clash against each other. They go up, they're covered by snow, then the glaciers melt, and they leave all these stones and limestone and all these incredible deposits that form our soils. So in addition to having these different altitudes and different temperatures, you also have these different soils. And this is very important because we have very well drained soil. So I have a little stone to show you. So this is a calcium carbonate covered stone, which is called limestone. And, you know, like the people in Burgundy are always talking about their limestone as if, It's some kind of really important component to making great wine. And I would kind of poo-poo the whole limestone thing, like, okay, this is one of those, like one more French thing to show their superiority. And then when I found that we had a ton of limestone, I started thinking, hey, you know, this limestone thing is pretty cool. And you know, I'm a scientist, so I don't like to talk about things that are not scientifically proven, but it is true that in areas where we have a lot of this calcium carbonate, we do make these really elegant, beautiful wines, as long as the area is relatively cool. If it's a really hot place, it doesn't matter if you have limestone, you know, the wines are going to probably be flat and alcoholic. But so I still don't know if the limestone thing is true, but we do make some great wines. And one of those wines is the Catena Alta Chardonnay. So the Catena Alta Chardonnay comes from 2 vineyards. Oh, wait a second.
What?
Vineyard that I showed you where my mom is?
Yes.
That 15% of that wine comes from that vineyard. Yes.
Cheers.
So
Fantastic.
actually, I forgot that we were tasting this wine.
It all comes together. That's
And the other part comes from the Adriana vineyard. And both these vineyards have a lot of these stones.
Okay.
Except that the one where my mother was standing, that one is a little lower in altitude, around 4,000 feet. And the main component of this wine is at 5,000 feet. And this wine, the idea for this wine is we want it to be beautiful and mineral, but we also want it to have some exuberance and some richness. So it does get a decent amount of oak. It has about 40% new oak. And we do allow for about 50% malolactic to happen because we do want a little creaminess. So this is our Chardonnay that's more on the creamy and exuberant side, as opposed to the white bones that we're going to have later, that is, you know, like really sharp and like super high acid. This one is more of the lover Chardonnay.
It is. It has that wonderful, I mean, there's a wonderful acidity, but the fruit still comes across as nicely ripe to me. Not overly ripe at all, but like ripe and sort of full, which is really nice. In addition to the climate and the temperature with altitude, is there anything else that altitude kind of contributes to the vine?
Well, so the soil that we already talked about, so usually higher up you see bigger stones, and lower down you'll see more clays, because clays are the lightest. And so they get carried by the glaciers of the rivers. And we also see more marine soils up on top, probably because of the way, you know, since the flakes were covered by ocean before they rose, there's probably more marine sediments in the higher altitudes.
Okay.
But the other thing is the sunlight. So the sunlight effect is very important. Over 4,000 feet, what we have found that we get more polyphenols in the skins, and the skins are thicker. And that happens in white wines and in red wines. And we've actually measured this. We did this really cool experiment that we put this plastic cover over some rows so that they wouldn't get the UV light, which is what the vine uses. And then right next to it, we had normal situation. And all we were covering was this particular light that's stronger at altitude. The rest of the light was coming in naturally. And we had a lot more polyphenols and thicker skins at altitude. And this phenomenon did not happen lower down. So when we did the same thing with the covering at 3,000 feet, nothing happened. There was no difference. But when we were higher up, the extra sunlight had an effect on the skins. So yeah, that would be the other element.
And the fact is sort of, it makes them sort of thicker with the additional polyphenols too? I've heard that before.
Yeah, so it's either more polyphenols and sometimes thicker, but not always thicker.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so, but you did say, so it's with both white and red, and I think that's an excellent transition to our next wine, which is actually the classic Malbec. So for those of you that have that, right? Compared to, so you said that this, the Catena Alta Chardonnay comes from, you know, part of the Adriana vineyard, which we're going to talk about later. Beautiful, thank you. But this one comes from different parts, right? So what is the altitude of the first Malbec that we're tasting?
So remember I was telling you about how you go up the mountain and you have these microclimates, what I call high altitude microclimates. And so, you know, this was something that we came up with, you know, about 25 years ago. My father and I basically went out and were planting Malbec in different places to see what was the expression of Malbec that we liked the most. And what we found was that we kind of loved them all. and then what we loved was the blend. And I remember, talking to people about the blend versus the single vineyard. And, I think in the wine world, maybe because of Burgundy and because of the fact that when you say, okay, this tastes like a specific place, there's kind of an obsession with place and with small parcels and small vineyards. But the truth is that most wine that's ever been made, has been blends. Like if you look at Bordeaux, it's a blend of different varieties. And most producers will, it depends. Like you also have the producer that has their little vineyard in their backyard. They're not going to do a blend. Right. But blending has been part of the history of wine. And so I basically said, I don't want anybody to make any rules for me. Like it's got to be single vineyard, it's got to be blend or whatever, I'm going to make the best wine I can make. So we actually have single parcel wines, single region wines, and we have blends. And Catena Malbec, I call it our Chanel number 5 because, it's like, from what I watched this movie about how they make Chanel number 5. And it was just so amazing because like, it's actually not identical every year. So they actually, smell the components and come up with like the most beautiful, perfect blend every year that's somewhat similar, but a little different. And, I just thought that that was kind of a good comparison because we have a different vintage. So we're always making a different wine. But how can we make the best wine for that vintage that reflects the altitude blend? And we can do these blends because, as I said, these vineyards are really close to each other. So it's very easy to bring the grapes into the winery, and then make the blend. So the Catena Malbec to me is like a very classic wine. It's often used for Master of Wine or Master Sommelier exams because it's so classic that you should recognize it as Malbec.
What are some of the classic notes? I would love to hear from you.
So so that's actually a very good question because if you go higher in altitude, cooler climate, you get more violets, you get more of kind of like a graphite minerality. You get more of like what I call the blue fruits, which is this kind of mix between some red fruits and some black fruits, so you don't get very ripe flavors in the higher altitude. In the lower altitudes, you often get less concentration, and you get slightly riper flavors, but you also get some red fruits, which but that are not so ripe. So it's kind of interesting. Malbec is a variety that does, how Syrah or Zinfandel can taste really, really ripe. That does not happen to Malbec.
Really?
Yeah. Now that just, if it's overripe, it just tastes alcoholic. It actually loses its aromas. So all these different aromatics make it hard to say this is what Malbec, tastes like, but or smells like. But I would say usually some violets, some florals, and a mix of black and red fruits, and a touch of spiciness. Just
not
a
too much
spiciness. So it'll be more spicy if you go down to the south of Uco Valley. But the main way that you can distinguish a Malbec is in the tannins. So, if you're drinking, let's say, a Cabernet Sauvignon or even a Syrah or a Merlot, you're always going to have a little like grip in the tannins, like something a little like harsh or like, like sandpaperish, but in a good way. Like I like those tannins. But Malbec just has smooth tannins. So Malbec is just velvety. It's very hard to get a Malbec that tastes too tannic, even from a very cool climate, low yields. So it's that luxuriousness that I think is the more prominent characteristic.
Is there ever an issue getting the tannins to full ripeness? Like, do you ever find in particular areas where Malbec's tannins don't develop enough?
Well, for sure, if in a very cold year, that could happen. That was the fear when my father planted at 5,000 feet elevation. He was actually told by his own viticulturist, Malbec is not going to ripen here because it was zone 1 Winkler, which is like Burgundy. So nobody would be planting Malbec in Burgundy. Although now with climate change, I think actually Malbec would do fine in Burgundy. But back then. But the thing is, because of the sunlight, the season is very long, and we actually can ripen the Malbec in this pretty cold environment. yes, for sure you could have a problem ripening if you have too much yields. So if you're leaving too many, so for sure, if you leave too many grapes on the vine with Malbec, you would have a hard time ripening, and you probably would have some underdeveloped tannins. But you know, we have also a lot of old vineyards. So this, like 20 years ago, I would have told you this was kind of a problem every year. But we now don't have any vineyards that are younger than 20 years.
Yeah, that makes
Except
sense.
for some vineyards that we're replanting. So I would say in younger vineyards, that's an issue. In older vineyards in Argentina, a rare problem.
And what are, in terms of the tannins of Malbec as a grape, how does that influence their ageability? This sort of soft, voluptuous, velvety tannin.
Yeah, my dad once practically had a sword fight with an English, with a British journalist about this, because he was in, so we actually did some research that showed that because of this long hang time, the tannins polymerize, and that's part of the explanation for why you can have like big tannins, because these are not light wines, like they're big wines, but they have these really smooth tannins. And so, you know, what my dad argued, because we've also done a lot of studies on older Malbecs that keep just as well as older Cabernets. And, you know, we do a lot of comparative tasting with wines from other countries, and we find that Malbec holds really well, but it's got to be from high altitude. So Malbec from lower altitudes does not hold as well, because the higher altitude places have more acidity, natural acidity, and, you know, a kind of grippier tannin that will last longer. So I'm talking about high altitude Malbec right now. So my dad was at this tasting, and this British journalist was like, no, this wine is not going to age too well because it tastes too good right now. And my dad was like, no, because these wines have nice high acidity and they have a lot of tannins. It's just that because of our climate, they're able to polymerize because we have a longer season. And so this wine is good now and it's going to be good later. And I think they just kind of drank enough that they forgot about the debate.
So it like eliminated the sword fight. There was no need to like, pull them out.
but really that is a fact with Malbec from Argentina, that it is a wine that ages really beautifully. Like we have wines from the 1990s that are just amazing. Unfortunately, even if our family's been made wine since 1902, we don't have Malbec from earlier than late 80s.
Okay.
So that we've saved for tasting. We have some Cabernets from the 60s because my dad is obsessed with Cabernet, and he made some Cabernet under a different label, none of the Catena wines that you know.
Yeah.
But we don't have Malbec. But there's other Malbecs from other producers that I've tasted, and I thought they were quite good.
And then also from the same altitude. There's a lot of interesting questions about the tannin right now.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, can I look at the question?
Of course you can.
Yes. Okay.
So the first question was the relationship of the sort of natural classic smooth tannins, as how that influenced that kind of rise in popularity of Malbec, which I think maybe we'll talk about as we go on to the next wine, because I know you have a huge part of that. And then just so we can get them both in, there was a question about comparing the Malbecs from Cahors to Argentina, and whether or not the Malbecs of Cahors then, by the argument, would have less ageability than high altitude in Argentina, or why they would, you know, why they would be able to age equally. I know it's a lot.
I might not be able to answer that question, but because I don't know enough about Cahors, but I'll try to at least tell you how I would study it.
Yes.
So let's start with the Catena Alta Malbec. And then we'll talk about some of those questions.
That sounds great. Yes.
So the Catena Alta Malbec. So you'll see that on the front there's a little drawing of the pyramid, and I have a little photo here of the pyramid for when you come visit. Those of you who haven't been.
Yeah.
So my father, when he built the pyramid, he wanted to build a monument to our terroir, to our mountain climate, and you know, we have irrigation canals that were built by the Native Americans in Argentina hundreds of years ago, like 400 years ago. And if it weren't for these water canals, like our vineyards get the water that's like mineral water, because the same source of the water from our vineyards is the source for the mineral water that is sold in Mendoza. So, you know, the air is pristine. There's no pollution. It's just an incredibly beautiful, pristine place. And my dad wanted the winery to reflect this heritage, and also like to be really a proudly South American. And so even if we have Italian descent, we have Spanish descent, he actually traveled all over California, looking at wineries all over Europe. And then he decided, after actually like a vacation in that he went to Tikal in Guatemala. And actually the Mayans never made it to Argentina. We had some of the Inca Empire in the north of Argentina. Most of the Native Americans in Argentina were nomads, so we didn't really have like some big civilization like Peru and Guatemala and Mexico. But anyhow, but that's why he decided to do a pyramid, and that's why that pyramid is on the label. But back to the very important question about Malbec.
Yes.
So actually, I've spent the last 20 years researching Malbec because you know, I kept on getting asked things like, you know, what comes after Malbec in Argentina, you know, and I would say, God, how could you ask me that question? You know, it's like, my great grandfather came from Italy and planted his first Malbec in 1902. I'm not about to replace it. Plus, it's so good, and it's the main variety in my country. You know, it's not like you can wake up some morning and say, I'm going to turn some other variety into the main variety. Plus, it tastes good. But I always kept on getting asked this question as if it were a fashion. So I sort of, you know, put it upon myself to study Malbec. And I've actually read like a ton of old French textbooks. I studied French in high school and college, and everybody always told me, yeah, French art. And everybody always told me that's what a useless thing to study French. But actually, it came in handy. Although the waiters in Paris still tried to speak to me in English, which really pisses me off. But anyhow, so what I learned was that Malbec was not only, it was known since the Roman times, it was famous at the court. It was drank by Eleanor of Aquitaine when she married Henry II. She was the Queen of France and England, so super famous lady, probably the most famous queen of the Middle Ages. She lived till the age of 82, which you can imagine that in the 12th century, that was like today living to 125. Like nobody lived till 82. And you know why that might have been, right?
Because
she drank Malbec.
Of
but
course.
anyhow, she famously drank Malbec at her wedding. This isn't like the chronicles of the time. And the wine of Cahors was Malbec, and this was like literally the most famous wine because she brought the wine of Cahors, which was a region, to England, and she made it famous around Europe. And then now the really interesting thing is that in the Médoc, where all the first growths come from, you know, the Latours, the Margaux, all those famous wines, I would talk to people from Bordeaux. You know, we have a partnership with Rothschild, the Rothschild family, the owners of Chateau Lafite. And I would ask them, like, how much Malbec was planted there? And they would be like, oh, yeah, there was a lot, but I mean, I don't really know. And then I finally managed to get all the registries. And what I found was actually that there was more Malbec planted in the 19th century than Cabernet Sauvignon in Bordeaux. Like, that's kind of amazing. And that actually Malbec was used for the fruit, for the color, and for the soft tannin. So actually, there's one really beautiful text where it says, don't ever bottle a Cabernet without Malbec. Because, you know, the Cabernet has the harder tannins, and you blend it with the Malbec, and it makes this beautiful wine.
Interesting, so yeah.
That the question of, do you think that this smoothness might be some of the explanation? I mean, very possibly, because I think that, you know, the human palate loves richness. You know, we like, you know, ice cream and creamy things, and we like, you know, a steak that you can like eat with a butter knife, like that has all this fattiness and texture, but we don't really want bitterness. You know, we want that smoothness. And so in a way, Malbec gives you all. So it gives you the fruit, the luxuriousness, but with the smooth tannins. So I think that, yes, possibly. And in terms of the Cahors questions, I actually went to Cahors. I tasted a lot of wines. I thought they were so different. They almost didn't taste like the Malbec I knew. And actually, part of the explanation is that, you know, the Malbec that went to Argentina is pre-phylloxera. So phylloxera was this, you know, this worm that basically killed all the vineyards in Europe. It came from North America in ornamental plants, and then some French people brought it to France as a decorative plant, then planted it because they didn't know they had phylloxera, and then it basically went on to kill the vineyards, you know, all over Europe, Italy, Spain, and then it was saved actually by this entomologist for Missouri with a French scientists where they figured out grafting the American rootstock with the Vitis vinifera, and that's how the whole, wine industry in Europe was revived. And most vineyards in the world, even in North America, are planted with American rootstock because, even if the American rootstock is not sensitive to phylloxera, if you plant the European vine like Cabernet and Merlot and all that in the US, you have to use grafting because otherwise the little thing eats it up.
It'll kill
in
'em.
Argentina, we don't have a lot of grafting because we don't have a big phylloxera problem, but we sometimes graft for other reasons like, stones in the soil or nematodes. But 90% of the vineyards in Argentina are ungrafted. So actually all the wines that you're drinking today are from ungrafted.
Ungrafted vines.
Yeah. So the question about Cahors. So these selections of vines came to Argentina. So we have a lot of Massal selections, and a Massal selection means that you have a vineyard planted with this whole room, and like let's say there were 100 people on the Zoom. Each vine is an individual, and we're all planted one time, or maybe, I don't know, maybe more than one time, but it's pretty much filled with individuals. What a clonal selection is, we choose Nancy and Toshio and Linda and Lindsay, and we just keep them and we only plant them and we get rid of everybody else. That's what, what clonal selections, which happened a lot when people were planting on grafts, they were selecting the plants that they thought were the best. The old way of planting a vineyard, this is how, even actually in my father's time, he planted vineyards that way, is you would go to a parcel, you'd say, oh, I love the wines that come from here. You get the prunings, you put them in little pots, and the next year you plant that. Today, there's all kinds of issues, viruses, grafting. You can't do that anymore. It's very hard to do that. Although some people still do it in Argentina, but it's a little dangerous because you could be propagating a virus or something. That would be for we'd have to do a whole hour session about this.
Yeah.
Amanda and I could geek out on it.
Yeah,
but
I'll be there.
yeah, but anyhow, the point being that we have these selections that were really old, that were not kept in Europe because we have the lower yielding selections. So the Argentine Malbec has small berries, small bunches, low yields. You cannot get it to yield high. Impossible. Like if you get 4 tons per acre, it's like a miracle. Whereas we've actually brought Cot, which is what they have in Cahors and what they have in Europe mostly, and that produces like 15 tons per acre. Like it's crazy. Like you actually have to do something to keep it under control. So I think that some of it has to do with the plant selection that in Europe, because they had a problem with Malbec that it wasn't high yielding enough because they had frost. They had something with the weather that lowered the yields of Malbec, that they only kept the selections that were high yielding, whereas what came to Argentina was the more qualitative stuff. So it's possible that if Cahors replanted with the Argentine stuff, they might make some really interesting wines. And honestly, I really enjoyed the wines of Cahors. I thought it was delicious. They're more rustic. They have a lot of personality, but they're so different that it's almost like more different than, like it's more different a Malbec from Argentina, a Malbec from Cahors, than a Malbec and a Cabernet from Argentina, Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's true because I mean, I've had clearly a lot of us have had both, and I would say anyone who's had them side by side would not mistake them in a heartbeat. There's just no way.
They're very different.
Between the two Malbecs that we're having right now, obviously the Catena Alta Malbec, what's the main difference between these two?
So both of these are altitude blends, which I explained before. But the Catena Alta it says historic vines. So we basically pick, the part of the vineyard that has historically given us, the best fruit, the best flavor. It's usually a parcel that ripens all at the same time. And so it's, the Catena Alta Malbec is like a super duper selection of Catena. They're all our own family's vineyards. The Catena Alta is just like a little super special thing. It's a tighter selection in the vineyard. Always comes from the same spot in the vineyard though every year, and it has a little more oak and a little more age in the barrel.
I find that I'm getting a little bit more even aromatics uplift out of it too. Like there's a really beautiful, the florals are coming out a little bit more, those kind of violet notes I think that you're talking about. And the concentration of fruit is also, there's just a beautiful kind of richness to it that sort of steps up a little from your Chanel number 5.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a wine that's a more serious wine. It's age-worthy. Although, you know, the Catena wines from the 90s are so stunning right now. Like,
are they?
Classic, yeah.
That's exciting.
But yeah, the Catena Alta is like, it's got a little more of everything.
It does. It's just, and it warms your heart a little bit more. Okay, there's a couple more questions here, and then I definitely want to move on to the white bones. Okay. I also have the picture I'm going to show of the Adriana vineyard, but before that, I wanted to ask, someone was asking if you've been experimenting with making sparkling wine since you've been so successful with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. I thought that was an excellent question since we're moving into the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir now.
Yeah, so that is a very good question. Argentines drink a lot of sparkling wine. And so we make sparkling wine and we make a méthode champenoise, so like the very traditional. And the problem is that we sell it all in Argentina, and there's so much demand that the idea of exporting it and having to compete with champagne, you know, I actually thought of it, but actually the way I decide things is by comparative tastings. When I was getting started at Catena, you know, I was a doctor. Oh, I have to tell, Amanda, I will not forget to tell your story.
Yes.
But, you know, I was a doctor. I didn't really know anything about wine. I did actually know quite a bit about wine because I used to go to France with my dad as his translator when he would go visiting chateaus. So actually since like my late teens, like since I think my first trip with my dad, I was 19 and I was drinking first growth. So I was actually kind of a wine snob as a doctor. And my dad gave me this credit card that I could buy all the wine I wanted.
Hey-o.
Like literally when I was 19, because I was going to school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the drinking age was 18. So literally, but I was never a drunk. Like I literally would buy these fancy bottles, and then when my dad would come visit, we would sit in my dorm and we would order pizza, and he made me buy Riedel glasses. And so we would sit there and we would, you know, drink Penfolds and Vega Sicilia and Chateau Latour. I mean, it was incredible. But anyhow, so I knew wine and I knew science, and I was really interested in plant biology. So but you know, I didn't know anything about the wine business. And I said to my dad, I said, Dad, what is this marketing word? What does that mean? Like market? Like I literally did not know what the word marketing meant. And so I go to my dad and I ask him, you know, I went to Harvard. Like you'd think I would know, but like literally they don't teach you this. Like I'm sure all of you, if you're in a business, you understand marketing. Like, you know, once you become an adult, you understand what marketing is, because there's basically nothing you can do in life without understanding, you know, you're either selling something or marketing yourself. But I didn't know what it was. And so my dad says, listen, Laurita, and he always calls me Laurita. He said, there's only one thing you need to know. If you can make a wine that's twice as good as its price. So if your $20 wine can be as good as the $40 wines, if your $100 wine can be as good as the $200, $300, $500 wines, then you don't need any marketing, because you're going to win hearts by just over delivering in quality. And he said, don't worry about making the best wine we can make. And that's why I went to work in research and, you know, like doing micro vinifications and really trying to understand how can we make the best wine. And then what we always did was we do these blind tastings where we'd put our, you know, $50 wine with $100, $200 wines. And if our wine was in the same league, the price was right. And if it wasn't, well, the price was wrong, or we had to reblend. And, you know, that became kind of my motto. It's like, how do you have twice the quality? But then when I did it with champagne and I compared what we were making with champagne, well, guess what happened? I like champagne more.
I mean, it's hard to compete. It's hard to compete.
And it was even worse. I like the $20 champagne more than my $40 sparkling. So please do not tell this to the people that sell our sparkling wines in Argentina, because they're really proud of them and they think they're amazing. And they are amazing for what's available in Argentina. So our sparklings are very good in Argentina, but they are not as good as champagne. And I'm not in the business of doing something that's not as good as
Mm-hmm.
the other people are doing. So that's the long answer.
But what you are doing really, really well is making exquisite Chardonnay from the Adriana Vineyard.
Thank you. And you know, it's possible that we could make better sparkling as good as champagne if we spent, you know, 25 years doing research and 25 years doing microvinifications. And if we did all the work we've done, you know, in the Adriana Vineyard, maybe, you know, maybe we do have the terroir and the flavors, but, you know, I haven't spent that energy. I've sort of, you know,
Well, you've been busy focusing on.
Yeah, focusing on something else.
But I mean, that it's just like all for the future. So it's not like the vines are going anywhere. It could very easily be a, you know, 2030 project or something.
That's the one great thing about wine is that, you know, you can always do it later. I'm not seeing people stopping drinking wine ever. You know how, I don't know, like I read like articles and they're like, oh, you better get ready, like your industry might disappear. You know, it's always depressing to read, you know, business things. I try not to, you know, and you know, but it's like, how could people possibly stop drinking wine? It's possible that they might start drinking from different kind of containers and things, but I don't see it. You know, 6,000 years humans have been drinking wine.
Yeah.
It's not going away.
I don't think so. I think it's made a good mark.
And actually, I'll tell you now the story. Actually, let's start drinking the next wine. What's the next wine?
It's the white bones. So
okay,
I
so
wanted
start drinking the white bones. Wait,
do you want to share the map yet, or you want to tell your story?
No, because I want to tell a story. The first comment from Amanda. So when I was going to school, I loved biology, and I thought my dad was great, and I liked wine, but I wanted to drink the family's wines, not make them. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people. I thought, you know, what my dad did was amazing. I loved it, but it was still a business, and I did not want to do a business. I thought making money was not my thing, although now I care, because if I don't make money, I can't plant vineyards, I can't pay good salaries. Like, I really care about money now. I think if you're running a business, you do, but you know, it's easy for 18-year-olds to poo-poo money, and that was me. I was one of those. And so I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to help people. I thought that was the way to help people. And I have to say that being a doctor, you get a lot of instant gratification in the sense that you make a difference for somebody right there and then, especially emergency medicine, which is my field. Like, you change lives right there at the moment. But I today am convinced that me, Laura Catena, I make more of an impact making wine than being a doctor, because, you know, how many patients can I see? But when you make wine, especially from you know, what we do in Argentina, not only it's the impact on people like you that are, you know, your evening is better. Like, you know, compare evening without wine, evening with wine. It's like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 3 or a 9.5. It makes a big difference. Like, and actually there's studies that show that people who drink wine smile more, again, in moderation. So if you drink in excess or you binge, then it's all bad, because you get all the diseases, and, you know, then you're cranky and it's all bad. So if you can drink in moderation, it's good for your health. 30% reduction in strokes, 30% reduction in dementia, 30% reduction in heart attacks. There's better control of diabetes. There is some slight increase in some cancers, but it is tiny compared to the benefits to cardiovascular health. So I am convinced that, you know, that making wine for the people of the world is creating more happiness. And actually, there's also really good studies that the happier you are, the healthier you are. So like, when they compare people with a disease, they actually do surveys of how happy those people are, and the people who are happier do better by a lot. So anyhow, so I'm convinced that making wine is good. And then the second thing, and this is really important to me, is my region, Mendoza. You know, Mendoza, when I grew up, was very poor. Like, you know, you would drive around and I mean, there's just so much poverty. You saw it. And today Mendoza is thriving. Like, you know, we have a Starbucks. Like, you guys, whatever you think of Starbucks, you know, I also go to my little local cafe. But when you get a Starbucks in a town, that means that there's prosperity in this place. And, you know, and the schools are painted, and people have gardens, and people just look happier, and there's wealth, and, you know, and the economy of the whole region has been elevated by wine exports. You know, every time you guys drink a bottle of Argentine wine, you are helping somebody. You know, you don't need to donate to a charity. You buy a bottle of wine and you just help somebody have a job. And so today, I actually think that being a good business owner, you know, who takes good care of their staff and of the environment, you know, all the things that we know that a good business owner does, is for sure as important as being a healthcare worker. And, you know, and I think like with COVID, everybody, like there's even more admirations. And my husband's a doctor and he's always reminding me of how being a doctor is so much more important than being a business person, which I'm both, but, you know, I do more of the wine. But I tell him he's wrong. You know, I think we all play our role. And, you know, wine is up there in the leagues of something that helps people in my book.
I mean, you have a very, very, you're coming from a lot of, you know, clout, I think. So I think we should all listen to you, obviously.
Well, but I do emphasize the moderation thing. And I think all of us who love wine, it's important to apply moderation to our own consumption and to our friends, and to really talk about moderation. You know, especially if you're selling wine that you make money from it, you should never be tempted to want people to drink too much, ever. You know, and that's something I promised myself when I started making wine, was, you know, I would always talk about moderation. Actually, I never do a tasting without talking about moderation at some point. And sometimes people try to get me to stop talking.
About moderation?
Yes.
No, I think it's great. I think you're absolutely right. I think obviously everyone who's on this call is great at it and is totally, I mean, right, everyone? We all understand, and she's totally right. But you are right. And I think, you know, also my argument for moderation is once you pass the point of moderation, you actually start enjoying your wine less, I think. So we don't want to do that. We want a maximum enjoyment. And so like cutting it off right at the peak is always recommended.
Okay.
But I do want to talk. So we are getting close, Laura.
Okay.
But I did want to, with the Adriana Vineyard, I'm going to show this right now. It's such a special place. And I know this is where we're going to kind of talk a little bit more, you guys. This is a really, really beautiful, this is the vineyard, here we are, that the White Bones comes from. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about this. Can you see the image? Is this all right, Laura?
Yeah, I see it perfectly. So, so the Adriana Vineyard was planted in 1992, and my father actually started really thinking of, you know, can I make the equivalent of a Grand Cru in Mendoza? And he had really been inspired by the California Revolution. You know, he met Robert Mondavi. You know, he had grown up in an Italian family where his grandfather, my great grandfather, had told him, listen, you know, we make great wine in Argentina. This is the promised land. My Italian great grandfather loved Argentina. He actually ate a piece of steak for breakfast every morning to remind himself of how lucky he was, because there was so much food, and there wasn't a lot of food in Italy when he left. But he told my dad, but never try to compete with the French, because, you know, the French have this thing called terroir. And you know, whatever. I think he thought we didn't have that in Argentina. We're publishing actually next week the most extensive terroir study ever done of any wine variety in Scientific Reports, which is a Nature magazine. It's coming out from our institute in collaboration with this climatologist from the US, whatever. So like, we've gone from my great grandfather saying, don't compete with the French, to we're publishing the most extensive study that actually it hasn't been published by anybody from France, anything that extensive. But anyhow, going back to the Adriana Vineyard. So when my dad went to California as a visiting scholar to UC Berkeley, he would visit the Napa Valley, and he met people, you know, like Mr. Robert Mondavi. And you know, what he realized was that these Californians were saying, we can compete with the French. And, you know, you've all heard about the Judgment of Paris and that the movie, wait, it's Bottle Shock. Is that the name of the movie?
Yeah, that's yeah, with Alan Rickman, the wonderful.
Yeah, great. I love that movie. I think everybody who loves wine should watch it. But, you know, and he said, well, hey, if these Californians could do it, I'm going to go do this in Argentina. And at first, though, he thought that what he needed was a technological revolution, because we had old vineyards. We had this Malbec variety that nobody knew anything about. And we had these long winemaking traditions, but he thought maybe if I buy some like the fancy tanks and presses and all this fancy equipment, I can make a great wine. And then he started traveling a lot to France. And what we did learn from the French was that climate and soil really mattered. And that's why I founded the Catena Institute, which was to study our climate and soil and the Malbec plant selections. And what he realized was that he needed to find a cooler place, because in a cooler place, he would get that natural acidity, those more elegant tannins. And he found this place in the Adriana vineyard, which is at almost 5,000 feet elevation, where he was told again that the grapes would not ripen. And we now have these single parcel wines, 2 Chardonnays, 3 Malbecs from Adriana. We've had 6 100 points from different journalists, which is like unimaginable. I don't like talking about points, but when you're from Argentina and people like are a little, sometimes reluctant to believe that you can make great wine, having these ratings does matter. And in this vineyard, literally when my father planted, there was nothing there. But he chose the site because it was cool. Then we also found that it had this incredible limestone soil. And the white bones comes from a parcel that you see it there. I don't know if you can read it, but it's right next to the other parcel, which is called White Stones. They have very different soil. So the white bones has like a really shallow topsoil with loam. And then underneath it has like this chunky calcium carbonate, like, what I was showing you, like, but not like this, it's more crumbled. And because it looks like bones, and, I'm a doctor and, I did anatomy and, like all doctors, I have my bones at home, like that used, usually they're made in plastic, by the way. You don't, like in the old days, they had human, but, you don't do that anymore, except for when you're doing anatomy lab. But it looked like crumbled bones. So we call the wine also, it was bony, it's really edgy. And so that's why we called it White Bones. And that's the story of this vineyard. And Adriana is my little sister's name. And when my father was planting this vineyard, my brother and I were in university and I wasn't giving him the time of day because I was doing my medical thing. And my little sister was going to the vineyard every day with him. We have all these pictures of her holding my dad by the hand. And so we thought it should be named after her.
This, so it's interesting because I think that if you don't mind, I'll share that map with everyone when I send thank you. So
of course.
I think I remember, there's every little parcel on here, I think has different kinds of soils, right? So it's really, really kind of segmented by the soil types within this vineyard, right? There's quite a variation.
Oh yeah, there's quite, we have over 100 single parcels and we divide them all. We harvest them separately. We do like different cover crops, different pruning. Like we try to really make each parcel, be its best. I call it the same philosophy of parenting, which, my husband he's actually American from the Midwest, believe it or not. I love him. These Midwest men are quite amazing. They're kind of their own. Very polite. He teaches my kids really good manners, which I appreciate. But he has all these rules, like everybody's got to do the same, like all the kids have to have all the same rules. And, I really believe that you have to be a different parent to each kid. Every kid needs their individual parenting. And it's hard to negotiate because then they get into discussions like, why did you do this and that? But to me, the vineyard is the same. Each parcel needs its individual parenting to shine. And you need to appreciate what's great about this one parcel and let that shine.
So Laura, I failed you. I'm very sorry.
Oh, no.
We are at 5 o'clock right now.
Oh, okay.
But if you're okay staying on, I know we do have.
Let's stay like 10 more minutes or something because you guys are like, most of the time I do this, I make this threat about the 2 questions per wine because nobody asks anything, but you guys are amazing. And I saw that somebody didn't get to go to our winery because of COVID. So if you have, by the way, we're closed right now and we're reopening with this whole like underground hospitality place. And my dad's gone crazy. Like my dad's 81, but he acts like a 17-year-old. Like he never stops having new projects. So he's built this whole hospitality center that's going to be incredible. I've seen, I was there at the beginning, but now they're almost finished. And I want you to come there. And if for some reason, I don't know who it is, you have a hard time getting a visit, like just mention my name. Don't feel bad because it's usually, we have a lot of Brazilians that come and they take all the spots. And so, which I can understand because they're really close by. But if you have a hard time getting an appointment, just mention my name.
It's Sarah and I, my daughter and I were going to go there for my birthday.
Oh,
And
okay.
last March, and then right before it all got canceled, and so we're coming the minute we can.
Okay. So yeah. So if like maybe would you write to Sasha or
Yes.
Andy or Maria, like just like make sure that I just don't want you to somehow try to go and then they say no or they say they don't have a spot.
Oh yeah, we will
you're
do.
in.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will be the conduit. I will get
Okay.
you. I will get you guys, Sarah and your Michael.
Oh, and
thank you.
there's somebody else that is going to Lael.
Lael, that's amazing. And so is, of course, yes, everyone, if you want to go visit, send your, which is everyone, I'm sure. I'll get that. And then you're going to have everyone's email now, Laura.
Great.
So there was a question about, as we're talking about the Domaine Nico. So this is our final wine. Yeah. And so I want to talk about this first, although someone else was asking you to speak to your other Pinots as well, because someone is drinking
the Luca?
The Nico Grand Mère.
Oh, the Grand Mère.
Yeah, so Dan is drinking the Nico Grand Mère. I guess he's super fancy, Dan.
Yeah.
But what is the, let's talk about the Pinot. I think you have a really great story about this. This is kind of your wine.
Yeah, so actually the story about the Pinot has some parallels with the story about the Chardonnay, which is people ask us, well, why did you plant Chardonnay or Pinot? And there were some plantings of Chardonnay, mostly Chardonnay, not as much Pinot in Argentina that came at the same time as Malbec. Wait, just 1 second, because somebody's ringing my door. I just want to make sure somebody's answering.
Yeah, no problem. All good.
Let me just go check. It's literally 1 second. You guys keep on tasting. I'll be right back.
So everyone keep on tasting. So as you can see, I mean, it's great. We're already past time. Thank you all for staying on. Obviously, Laura is amazing and she has so much to share. So obviously, yes, I will pass on all of your great, wonderful, good wishes. And as I mentioned, when we get to the end of this, and I'll send out tomorrow. We're not done yet, but you're welcome to leave if you need to. Obviously, we're a little over time, but I'll send out tomorrow in the email with a reminder that if you're planning on visiting Laura Catena, then you let me know and I will pass that information on. Okay, everything okay?
Yeah. It was actually my brother coming to pick something up.
Fantastic.
But we figured it out.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right. So the Domaine Nico, basically, Chardonnay, there were some old selections of Chardonnay, which is actually another whole conversation, which is like we brought some clones from Burgundy, but we have also Massal selections of Chardonnay that are pre-phylloxeric. So we're actually doing a lot of work on Chardonnay. And some of it is the Catena Alta that you tasted. But going to Pinot Noir, the reason why my dad and I planted so much Chardonnay and actually quite a bit of Pinot Noir is that we like to drink it. And I think that, Amanda can vouch that, when you have one of the great things about your own family winery, which is really hard to have your own family winery. Like it's hard to make money. It's hard to pay salaries. It's hard to have enough money to plant the vineyard. It's like, it is no easy thing to run a family winery because like all your money is tied up all the time. But one of the great things is that you can love a certain wine and you can decide to grow it. And then you have to get lucky that you choose the right place. Like there's some science, there's some luck. Like you have to do all your research, but I mean, sometimes all the conditions should be right and it doesn't come out glorious. Other times it does. So with Pinot Noir, basically my dad and I love, we travel a lot to Burgundy. We also, I love drinking Pinot Noir from California. I enjoy Pinot Noir from Oregon. And basically we decided we wanted to make some Pinot Noir. So we actually brought some selections from France and planted them in many different altitudes. And it literally took,
was it Burgundian clones?
So it's, so Dijon clones, the classic Pommard 777, 115, but we actually didn't continue planting some, because a lot of them that were good in Burgundy were bad in Argentina, and some of the ones that were not as good in Burgundy were better in Argentina. So that's the thing with clones, that you really have to research in your own environment to know what's going to work. I'm sure that people from California could have the same experience. So anyhow, so we planted all these vineyards, but it literally took me, I don't know, at least 20 years, because the first vineyards we planted in the 90s and we planted some in 2000, to make a Malbec, a Pinot Noir that I thought, wow, this is gorgeous and amazing. And in 2016, we had a really cool vintage. And we had been working on these parcels since 2006, like micro vinifying them separately. And then in 16, we just went crazy. We were like, oh my God, these are all these different parcels. We have 5 parcels, taste so different. They come from different soils and different altitudes. And then kind of usually what happens in our family is the wine is born first, and then we have to come up with a name, because like that's the last thing. And Nico is my daughter, and she'd always been complaining that I have a wine name. I have a wine named Luca, which is my son that actually has been around for 20 years. And then I have a wine called Beso de Dante. It's one of the Luca wines. And then I didn't have a Nico wine because, you know, I don't know, I already had named the wine when she was born. And so we were like, okay. And then my great grandfather is Nicola, so he was also called Nico. So whatever, we named the wine, and it comes from high altitude against these limestone soils. And I mean, the vineyards are now, you know, they're all older than 20 years. I like, my favorite thing is to taste them all together. The Histoire that we're drinking right now comes from like the highest altitude, almost 5,000 feet elevation, close to where the White Bones comes from, not too far, but it's in like this little hillside, and it's got a little more like a little deeper soil. The one thing with Pinot Noir is that it doesn't have such a deep root system. So if you like, Malbec does well in very poor soils. Like you can plant it in like the shallowest, like most rocky soil, and the Malbec will just create roots. Pinot Noir, you can't stress it as much. And so it's actually planted in this really nice little hill with a slope. And the Histoire the reason for the name is there's this kind of sexy, you might call pornographic novel that is like, it's kind of really soft, like compared to the Shades of Grey. I haven't read it, but I've heard some of the excerpts. It's like very mild. But anyhow, it's called Histoire, and I read it in college, and I thought, oh my God, like, look at this, like amazing, like whatever. And so I called the wine Histoire because I don't know, the vineyard is named Adriana after my sister, and I called it History of A, which is like, and the wine is very sexy. So I was like, I'm going to pick a sexy book to name the wine. And then all the words in the label are in French. And basically I woke up one night in the middle of the night, and I had all these ideas about the names in French. And I spent a lot of time in France, and, you know, it's really a French inspiration for this project. So that's why the words like the grand-mère is grandmother. And I have quotes in the back that are like what grandmothers say. Like, so if you get all the bottles, you'll see some really cool quotes.
And are these all from the same plots of land ultimately?
No, they're all from different parcels.
Okay.
So the Histoire and the grand-mère, and the grand-mère one, actually, the person drinking the grand-mère, do you have the bottle with you so you can read?
I know he does. He's going to get it. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity, since we don't have too much time, to pitch this beautiful book. Because someone else was asking, they said they love this book and they wanted to know if you'll be writing another. But this is, yes, lovely. I love everyone who's got their gold in the vineyards.
So the book, it actually won the Gourmand Book Awards Best in Wine History, which was a shock. And it's an illustrated book about wine.
It's amazing.
And it's like, it's written so that it's easy reading. Like, I didn't want to write something super nerdy. Like, although I know that we are all wine nerds, I wanted this book like to be a fun read with a lot of illustrations, and I want it to be fun for somebody who's an expert, but also someone who's a novice.
And there's some great stories, really great stories.
Thank you, Sasha, for checking it out. So is it Dan so what is, Dan, can you unmute and read us, what does it say about the grand-mère?
It's a quote from William Carlos Williams, who's a great American poet. And it says, "Oh, you think you're smart, you young people," she said, "but I'll tell you, you don't know anything." Those are the last words of his grandmother.
Those were the last words of his grandmother. And I mean, depending on what kind of grandmother you have, you can relate or not relate to that.
This is a beautiful, elegant wine. It's really gorgeous.
Oh, thank you, Dan. I do love these wines, and we make very little of them. Yeah, drink up. Wait, I wanted to tell you guys. Oh, but there is one other thing. So on the label, Dan, can you show the label? But they might not be able to see this. But basically, there's one thing that always upset me when I went to France, which was that all the businesses that say, you'll see like, famille, parents, frères et sœurs. And it always says brothers and sisters, always brothers first. And it doesn't really piss me off, but I was like, why does it always say the brothers first? And like France is filled with businesses that say brothers and sisters. So I changed it to sister and brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And like any French person who would read this would be like, no, that's wrong. It's always brothers and sisters. Like it would shock them that you put sister and brothers. And so it's kind of like my little play on French jargon. And my sons are totally okay with it. Like they don't they come second.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, their sister dominates them anyhow. So
just fun on that sort of the female perspective. I learned something from your book, Gold in the Vineyards. I didn't realize that at Chateau de Cam they only have female workers at harvest.
Yeah, because they need small hands because they have to pick only some of the bunches. And women are good for the detailed work.
Yeah, detail oriented. So these are fun facts that you will learn, ladies and gentlemen, when you order this beautiful book. And when you drink more of these beautiful wines. And Laura, Laura, I'm sorry, thank you. I was getting schooled. I'm trying to pronounce it better.
No, Laura's fine too.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate everyone being here. Does anyone have any final questions that you guys want to ask, or just unmute yourself and ask or say anything? But we'll probably tighten it up here in the next 2 minutes. You're getting so much. I hope you're reading this, Laura. There's amazing, just total love for you.
Thank you. And for you.
It's really awesome.
Thanks everybody for all your beautiful comments and questions.
Yes. Well, everyone have a really wonderful Friday, you guys. It is Friday, and that means perfect Friday happy hour. Get ready for a great weekend. Laura, thank you again so much. I hope we get to see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.